Welcome to my channel, and today I want to share a story that will take you deep into a past no one expected to return. It's about a powerful man who comes back to his village with pride, only to find the life he tried to leave behind standing right in front of him, carrying firewood with two children who look exactly like him. What happens next will change everything he thought he knew about love, truth, and responsibility. Let's start. The road lay silent beneath the harsh afternoon sun, its red dust rising gently with every passing breeze. A woman moved slowly along its edge, her body bent forward under the crushing weight of bundled firewood tied tightly across her back. Each step she took looked borrowed from the last ounce of her strength. Dust clung to her skin and darkened her faded dress, yet she did not stop. Behind her walked two little girls, identical in face and movement, their bare feet hardened by miles of unforgiving ground, their eyes far too knowing for children their age. The low growl of a powerful engine broke the stillness. A black luxury SUV rolled to a stop beside them, its polished surface foreign against the rural backdrop. Inside the vehicle, the man seated in the back froze, his breath caught, his chest tightening as though an invisible hand had seized his heart. His fingers trembled as his gaze locked onto the woman outside the window, and then the girls. Two faces that mirrored his own so closely that denial barely had time to form. Time did not slow. It shattered. In that single moment, a past he had buried beneath wealth and distance rose screaming to the surface. Kwame Agyarko had not returned to his hometown in nearly a decade. As the SUV glided along the wide highway leading away from the capital, Kwame sat upright in the back seat, his posture composed, his expression carved from discipline and restraint. Outside the tinted glass, Accra's towering buildings gradually gave way to open land, scattered homes, and wide stretches of red earth. This land had once defined his entire existence. Then, he had conquered another world. At 40 years old, Kwame Agyarko stood among the most influential businessmen in West Africa. His energy and logistics companies moved fuel, goods, and equipment across borders with ruthless efficiency. His name opened doors in government offices and closed deals before negotiations even began. People listened when he spoke. Power followed him like a shadow. Beside him sat Nadira Cole, his fiancée. She was immaculate. Her posture was perfect, her designer sunglasses resting lightly on her nose, her fingers scrolling idly through her phone as though the world outside the vehicle existed only as background scenery. Dust, hardship, and memory had no place near her. So this is where you grew up? Nadira asked, her voice curious but distant, as though observing a relic behind glass. Yes, Kwame replied calmly. She glanced out the window, noting the modest homes, the women balancing loads on their heads, the barefoot children darting between yards. A faint smile curved her lips, not admiration, but disbelief. It's very rural. Kwame did not respond. Inside him, something tightened. Not pain, he had learned to bury that, but something closer to pressure, like a door being forced open. He had brought Nadira here for one reason: closure. He wanted the village elders to see the woman he intended to marry. He wanted proof for them and for himself that he had moved on completely, from poverty, from shame, and from the woman he had once loved. Ama. In his mind, that chapter was finished. Years ago, Kwame had left this place burning with ambition and resentment. He remembered the humiliation of having nothing, of depending on others, of being unable to provide. Shame had clung to him like dust. He had sworn never to feel small again. As the car slowed near the village entrance, the driver glanced at him through the mirror. Nzer, should we take the longer route or pass through the center? The center, Kwame answered immediately. Nadira raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Yes. He did not know why he wanted this. Perhaps pride, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps some buried part of him needed to face the past one last time, to confirm that he had truly escaped it. As the SUV rolled forward, heads turned. Children stopped playing. Women paused mid-conversation. Men straightened, eyes narrowing with recognition. A car like this did not belong here. Whispers spread. That vehicle, who could it be? Is that Kofi Agyarko's son? Kwame felt it. The quiet awe, the respect, the recognition. It fed his ego even as it unsettled him. They recognize you, Nadira remarked, leaning closer to the window. They remember, Kwame replied. She smiled lightly. Must feel good, coming back like this. It did. He remembered leaving with nothing but a worn suitcase and a promise to himself. He had vowed that if he ever returned, it would be untouchable. And now he was. What he did not expect was for this return to dismantle everything he believed he had built. They passed the old market square. Kwame glanced out briefly, recognizing the spot where he once stood for hours, hoping to sell a handful of goods. He looked away. That man no longer existed, or so he believed. You never told me much about your former wife, Nadira said casually. Kwame's jaw tightened. There's nothing to tell. Still, she replied, you don't rise like this without scars. She made her choices, he said. I made mine. What he did not say was how deeply those choices had scarred him. The road narrowed, pedestrians crossed freely. The smell of firewood and cooked cassava filled the air. Then he saw her, a familiar silhouette bent beneath a heavy load of firewood. Her clothes were worn, her steps slow but steady. Behind her walked two little girls. They moved in perfect rhythm. Kwame's breath left him in a sharp inhale. The car slowed to a stop. Why are we stopping? Nadira asked. Kwame could not answer. The woman lifted her head, and in that instant, before memory turned into pain, his past stepped directly into his path. Adisa Mensima rose before dawn every day, not by choice but by necessity. She sat on the thin mat beside her sleeping daughters, watching their chests rise and fall in the dim light. Amani and Zola slept curled toward each other, as though afraid the world might pull them apart. She brushed their hair gently. Just a little longer, she whispered. Morning arrived without mercy. Adisa dressed, washed her face, and prepared for another day of survival. After waking the girls, she handed them the last pieces of cassava from the night before. They ate quietly, never asking for more. Mama, are we coming with you today? Amani asked. Adisa hesitated. Yes, she said softly. Together. The walk to the forest was long. Memories followed her like shadows. There had been a time when life was lighter, when laughter came easily, when she was someone's wife. Iwame. She had believed in his dreams with everything she had. She had sold her possessions, endured whispers, and stood beside him when no one else did. Then everything collapsed. Accusations, shouting, silence. He left. She never told her daughters about him. Not out of bitterness, but protection. By midday, the firewood was tied. The walk back was heavy. She did not see the SUV until it slowed beside her. The engine sounded wrong, too smooth, too powerful. Her heart skipped. Then she saw him. The world tilted. Kwame Agyarko. Behind him stood another woman, elegant, untouched by hardship. Adisa lowered her gaze instinctively. Shame rose like fire. She adjusted the strap across her shoulders, preparing to move aside. No, Kwame said suddenly. Wait! She froze. What do you want from me now? Adisa asked quietly. Before he could answer, a firm voice cut through the tension. Adisa. Mamanjeri approached slowly, her walking stick tapping against the earth. So, the elder said, eyes fixed on Kwame. You finally returned. The reckoning had begun. The village seemed to hold its breath. Adisa stood motionless beneath the weight of the firewood, her spine straightened more by pride than strength. The dust swirled softly around her feet as people slowly gathered at a distance, curiosity pulling them closer while caution kept them silent. Everyone knew this moment carried more than simple recognition. It carried history. Kwame stepped out of the vehicle. His polished shoes touched the earth that once cracked beneath his bare feet. For a moment, he felt unsteady, as if the ground itself questioned his right to stand there unchanged. The years had given him power, but they had not prepared him for this. Adisa, he said again, softer this time. She finally raised her eyes. They were calm, but not forgiving. They were the eyes of a woman who had learned how to survive disappointment without complaint. "You shouldn't have stopped," she replied evenly. "Your road is not this one anymore." Kwame swallowed. "It seems it still is." Before she could respond, Mamanjeri stepped forward, planting her walking stick firmly into the soil. Her presence alone commanded silence. She had watched generations rise and fall, promises made and broken. "You arrive with dust still on your wheels," the elder said, her voice steady. "Yet you act surprised that the past stands waiting." Kwame bowed his head slightly. "I didn't expect this." "No one ever does," Mamanjeri replied. "But truth doesn't wait for readiness." Behind Adisa, Amani and Zola clung to each other. Their eyes moved between Kwame and the woman seated inside the SUV. They did not understand the words, but they felt the tension. Nadira finally stepped out of the vehicle. She adjusted her sunglasses and surveyed the scene with visible discomfort. This was not the welcome she had imagined. There were no smiles, no admiration, only quiet judgment and curiosity. "Kwame," she said, forcing a polite tone. "What's going on?" He hesitated. Mamanjeri's eyes shifted toward Nadira. "And you are?" "Nadira," she replied. "His fiancée." A ripple moved through the gathered villagers. Adisa stiffened, but her expression did not change. "So," Mamanjeri said slowly, "the future meets the past." Kwame felt the words strike deep. "I didn't plan this," he said, "but I won't run from it either." Adisa laughed once, short, humorless. "You already did," she said, "years ago." Silence followed. Kwame turned his gaze to the children again. Up close, there was no escaping it. The shape of their eyes, the familiar seriousness, the unmistakable reflection of himself. "How old are they?" he asked quietly. Adisa tightened her grip on the rope securing the firewood. "Old enough to know hunger," she replied. "Old enough to walk long roads. Old enough to survive without you." Nadira's posture shifted. "Kwame," she said sharply, "you never told me." "I didn't know," he interrupted. His voice carried truth, but not relief. Mamanjeri studied him carefully. "A man does not need knowledge to carry responsibility," she said. "He only needs courage once the truth arrives." Kwame exhaled slowly. "I want to talk," he said to Adisa. Privately, she considered him for a long moment. Then she looked at her daughters. "Go to Auntie Salma's house," she told them gently. "I will come." The girls hesitated, then obeyed, glancing back once before disappearing into the crowd. Nadira stepped forward. "And me?" Kwame met her eyes. "Please, not now." Her jaw tightened, but she stepped back, humiliation flickering across her face. Adisa followed Mamanjeri toward the shade of an old acacia tree. Kwame joined them, leaving the luxury vehicle behind like an abandoned symbol of another life. "You left without looking back," Adisa said once they were seated. "You left me with questions I never asked out loud." Kwame lowered himself onto the bench. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of failing, afraid of staying small." "And so you made us smaller," she replied calmly. He nodded. There was no defense left. "I didn't know about the children," he said. "But now that I do, I won't disappear again." Adisa's voice remained steady. "Children don't live on intentions. They live on consistency." Mamanjeri nodded in agreement. "If you return now," she said, "it must be with humility, not authority." Kwame looked toward the path where his daughters had walked away. "I'm ready to learn," he said. The elder studied him for a long moment before standing. "Then your real journey begins today." Across the clearing, Nadira watched from beside the SUV, her future unraveling in silence. And Adisa, for the first time in years, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not from fear, but from the possibility that the road ahead might finally change. The house Mamanjeri offered for the conversation stood near the edge of the village, shaded by tall trees whose roots had split the earth over decades. Its walls were plain, its roof worn, but its doorway had witnessed more truth than many grand buildings ever would. Kwame stepped inside slowly, feeling as though each footfall stripped another layer from the man he pretended to be. Adisa entered behind him, her movements steady, her face unreadable. She placed her bundle down and sat on the wooden bench without invitation. There was no ceremony between them anymore. Life had burned that away. "This place has not changed," Kwame said quietly, more to himself than to her. Adisa nodded. "It didn't have the luxury to." Silence settled between them, thick but not hostile. Outside, the distant sound of children's laughter floated through the air, a reminder of everything that stood between past and future. "I didn't come back to control anything," Kwame began. "I came because I was tired of running." Adisa folded her hands in her lap. "Running gave you everything you wanted," she said. "Why stop now?" "Because I finally saw what it cost," he replied. She studied him closely. The confidence was still there, but something had softened. Or perhaps something had broken. She could not yet tell. "You remember the night you left?" she asked. Kwame swallowed. "Every detail." "You promised you would return when you were ready," she continued. Then years passed. No word, no explanation. "I thought silence would hurt less," he said. She shook her head slowly. "Silence teaches people how to survive without you." Those words settled heavily between them. Outside, Nadira paced beside the SUV, her heels sinking slightly into the dirt. The village air felt oppressive, watching her, measuring her. This was not the world she understood. She had imagined this visit as a victory lap, not a reckoning. When Mamanjeri joined them inside, her presence shifted the room immediately. She sat without speaking at first, letting the quiet work its way through them. "The children," the elder said finally, "are the center of this matter." Kwame nodded. "I want to take responsibility." "And what does that mean to you?" Mamanjeri asked. "It means providing," he said. "Education, healthcare, stability." Adisa lifted her gaze. "They are not a business plan." Kwame met her eyes. "I know. That's why I'm asking how to do this right." Mamanjeri's lips curved slightly. "Then listen more than you speak." Adisa leaned back against the wall. "My daughters will not be taken from this place like property," she said firmly. "They belong to themselves." "I don't want to take them," Kwame replied. "I want to be present." The elder nodded approvingly. "Presence is a beginning." Later that evening, Amani and Zola returned, their steps cautious as they entered the house. They stopped when they saw Kwame sitting quietly, his posture lowered, his voice gentle as he greeted them. "Hello," he said simply. They stared at him, unsure. He did not reach for them. He did not demand affection. He waited. Zola finally spoke. "Mama says you knew her before." "Yes," he replied, "for a long time." Amani tilted her head. "Are you staying?" Kwame hesitated, then answered honestly, "If you allow me." The girls exchanged glances. They did not smile, but they did not turn away. That night, Kwame chose not to sleep in the vehicle or demand comfort. He accepted a mat near the doorway of Mamanjeri's home. It was thin, the floor was hard, but for the first time in years his rest felt earned. Adisa lay awake nearby, listening to the sounds of the village. She did not trust easily, yet something in the air had shifted. Not forgiveness, not hope, but possibility. Outside, Nadira watched the lights dim across the village. She realized then that whatever future she imagined no longer fit into this place, and perhaps no longer fit into Kwame's life either. And as the moon climbed above the trees, 4 lives rested under the same sky, bound not by wealth or resentment, but by a truth that could no longer be ignored. Morning arrived quietly, carried on the soft call of birds and the distant sound of women preparing for the day. Kwame woke before the sun fully rose, his body stiff from the hard floor but his mind unusually clear. For the first time in years, there was no rush toward meetings, no urgency to check messages or control outcomes. The village moved at its own pace, indifferent to his former authority. Outside, Adisa was already awake, sweeping the yard with steady strokes. Her movements were practiced, efficient, shaped by years of repetition. She acknowledged Kwame with a brief nod but did not stop her work. "You didn't leave," she said simply. "I said I wouldn't," he replied. She paused for a moment, then continued sweeping. "Staying for a night is easy," she said. "Staying when life becomes uncomfortable is harder." Kwame absorbed her words without protest. Later that morning, Mamanjeri gathered a small group beneath the large baobab tree at the center of the village. Elders arrived slowly, leaning on walking sticks, their faces marked by time and wisdom. News of Kwame's return had spread quickly, and curiosity pulled others nearby, though they kept a respectful distance. Kwame stood before them, his posture straight, but humble. He did not speak immediately. The silence itself felt like a test. "You return with wealth," one elder finally said. "But wealth has a voice that often speaks too loudly." "I did not come to command," Kwame replied. "I came to repair what I broke." Another elder nodded slowly. "Repair requires patience." "I have learned that," Kwame said. Mamanjeri studied him carefully. "If you wish to be part of these children's lives," she said, "you must understand that responsibility does not erase history. It walks beside it." "I accept that," Kwame answered. The elders exchanged quiet looks. No decision was announced. Approval was not given freely here. Trust had to grow. Across the yard, Amani and Zola watched from beside Adisa. They stayed close to her, their small hands gripping her dress. Kwame noticed and felt no offense. Caution was natural. Later that day, Kwame followed Adisa as she went about her routine. Fetching water, preparing food, checking on neighbors who relied on one another for survival. He offered help without insisting. Sometimes she accepted. Sometimes she declined. He respected both. Nadira, meanwhile, struggled. She sat alone near the vehicle, dust settling on her carefully chosen clothes. The village offered her no comfort, no admiration. Conversations quieted when she passed. Children stared openly. She felt invisible and exposed at the same time. "This place is swallowing you," she told Kwame later, frustration sharp in her voice. "You don't belong here anymore." Kwame met her gaze calmly. "I belong where my responsibilities are." Her expression tightened. "And what about us?" He hesitated, only briefly. "I don't know," he admitted. The honesty stung more than anger would have. That evening, rain began to fall lightly, tapping against the rooftops. Adisa sat inside with her daughters, telling them a quiet story as they ate. Kwame listened from the doorway, careful not to intrude. The girls laughed softly at the ending. Zola glanced toward him. "You can sit," she said. Kwame's chest tightened. He moved slowly and sat at a respectful distance. He did not speak. He simply stayed. Adisa watched this silently. Trust did not arrive with grand gestures. It arrived in small, repeated moments. That night, as rain washed the dust from the ground, Kwame understood something clearly for the first time. Staying would cost him comfort, pride, and control, but leaving again would cost him something far greater. And so he chose to stay. Days passed, measured not by clocks, but by routine. Kwame rose with the sun and worked through the daylight hours alongside people who had never known boardrooms or contracts, only soil, sweat, and shared survival. His hands, once accustomed to polished surfaces, learned the weight of tools and the patience required to use them well. He did not announce his efforts, he simply participated. Adisa observed quietly. She did not praise him, nor did she discourage him. Years of managing alone had taught her that change needed time to prove itself. Still, she noticed the small things, how he listened more than he spoke, how he waited for instruction instead of giving it, how he returned each evening without complaint. The children noticed too. Amani began to ask him questions, small, cautious ones at first. Where had he traveled? What did he build? Why did his hands look different now? Kwame answered honestly but simply, never exaggerating, never avoiding responsibility. Zola remained watchful, studying him the way she studied strangers. Trust was not something she offered freely. But one afternoon, when Kwame repaired a broken stool without being asked, she sat beside him and handed him a tool without a word. It was enough. Nadira grew restless. The village offered no mirrors, no cafes, no distractions. Her phone lost signal more often than not, cutting her off from the world she controlled. She began to understand that this place demanded humility, something she had never needed before. "This isn't the life I chose," she said one evening, her voice edged with frustration. Kwame nodded. "I know." "And yet you're choosing it now," she replied. "Yes," he said quietly. The truth landed heavily between them. That night, Nadira packed her bags. There was no dramatic argument, no shouting, just a realization that their paths had split. At dawn, the SUV left the village, its tires carving fresh lines into the red earth. Kwame did not follow. Adisa watched from a distance as the vehicle disappeared. She felt no triumph, only clarity. Weeks passed. School arrangements were made. Medical visits became regular. Food was no longer rationed by fear. Still, Adisa remained firm in her boundaries. The children's lives were not bargaining tools. Kwame understood this and respected it. One evening, Mamanjeri called Kwame aside. "You have begun to unlearn who you were," the elder said. "That is harder than becoming successful." Kwame bowed his head. "I still have much to learn." "Yes," she replied, "but learning has started." Later that night, Kwame sat outside the house, listening to Amani and Zola argue softly over a storybook. Adisa's voice gently corrected them, guiding without force. The scene felt ordinary, and that was what made it extraordinary. For the first time, Kwame was not trying to be impressive. He was trying to be reliable. And in that effort, pride loosened its grip. The season shifted quietly. Rains softened the earth, and green pushed through ground that had long known only dust. Life in the village followed its steady rhythm, and Kwame moved within it without resistance. He no longer felt like a visitor. He felt accountable. Imani and Zola's days grew fuller. School brought new words, new confidence, and laughter that no longer sounded cautious. Kwame attended meetings with teachers, sitting beside Adisa rather than in front of her. Decisions were discussed, not declared. Adisa noticed the difference. He no longer sought her approval through grand gestures. Instead, he showed up consistently, walking the girls to school, listening to their stories, accepting correction when he was wrong. Stability, she learned, could be louder than apologies. One afternoon, a business associate arrived unexpectedly, his polished appearance clashing sharply with the village setting. He spoke of opportunities, of expansion, of urgency. Kwame listened calmly, then declined. "I'm restructuring," he said simply. "My priorities have changed." The man stared, confused. Kwame did not explain further. Later, Mamanjeri called Kwame and Adisa together. "The children will grow," the elder said. "They will ask questions. They will need honesty." Kwame nodded. "When they're ready, I'll tell them who I am and who I failed to be." Adisa looked at him for a long moment. "That truth matters," she said, "but so does how you live after it." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Zola sat beside Kwame. "Will you leave again?" she asked quietly. Kwame answered without hesitation. "No." She studied his face carefully. Then she leaned against his arm, just slightly. It was the first time. Adisa saw and said nothing. Weeks later, Kwame made a decision that surprised many. He moved a portion of his business operations closer to the region, creating local employment without disrupting the village's balance. No announcements were made. Work simply appeared. The village responded not with praise, but with acceptance. One night, as stars filled the sky, Adisa sat beside Kwame. "You stayed," she said. "Yes," he replied. She exhaled slowly. "Then we will see what tomorrow brings." For Kwame, that was enough. The years that followed were not filled with drama. They were filled with ordinary moments that slowly became the foundation of something real. The kind of life that could not be bought or planned, only built. Kwame woke each morning to the sound of roosters and children's voices. He no longer felt the constant hunger for approval from the world of wealth and power. He had found a different kind of success, one that required patience, humility, and responsibility. Amani and Zola grew stronger, their laughter louder. They were no longer the quiet children who watched the world carefully. They played freely, their days filled with school, friends, and small adventures. Kwame attended their school events, sat in the crowd during plays, and clapped loudly when they succeeded. Adisa watched him closely, her expression still cautious but softer than before. The village began to see him differently, not as a man who once left, but as a man who returned and stayed. The change was not instant, but it was real. Nadira never returned. Kwame did not search for her. He understood that some chapters close without the need for further argument. She belonged to a life he no longer wanted. He had chosen a different path, one built on responsibility and honesty. One evening, Mamanjeri called the family together under the baobab tree. The elders sat in a circle, and the children sat quietly nearby, listening without fully understanding the weight of the moment. "You have done what many men never do," Mamanjeri said to Kwame. "You returned, not to take but to give." Kwame nodded. "I am still learning." Adisa looked at him, her eyes steady. "You have done more than you know," she said. "But this is not only your story, it is theirs too." Amani and Zola leaned closer to their mother. They did not need to speak to understand. Their lives had changed because of this man's choice. That night, as the family walked home together, Kwame felt something he had never felt before. Peace. Not the peace of being wealthy, the peace of being present. He understood then that life did not reward people for their power. Life rewarded them for their willingness to remain when it would have been easier to leave. And as the moon rose high above the village, 4 lives continued forward. Not perfect, but honest. If you felt this story deep in your heart, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.